sort of conversation, really going into a technical deep dive of exactly how all this works. And I kind of want to spend the last part of this conversation focused around more of the question of why does it matter, right? And so, you know, kind of to take that conversation a little deeper, I think we have quite a few panelists that'll be joining us today. And so I'd like to welcome the panelists up onto the stage right now, including Shumla as well. And we'll have a more high-level conversation around, you know, blockchain and privacy and, you know, what role it plays today and in the future. Yeah, feel free to take a seat. All right, cool. So without further ado, this is how it's going to work. We've got one mic and we'll just pass it around. And yeah, if you've got a comment or a suggestion, then just pass it to each other. How's that sound? Cool. Awesome. So we'll go start with a quick round of introductions just so that everyone knows who's in the panel. And then we'll go deeper into, you know, the conversation around privacy and why it matters.
Morning, everyone. My name is Kevin Nielsen. I'm a developer relations engineer at Moonbeam. Moonbeam is an Ethereum compatible smart contract platform on Polkadot. So Moonbeam is our Polkadot parachain, which we just finished launching in January. And then Moonriver is our Kusama parachain, which has been live since about last August.
Hello, this is Shumla. I'm co-founder of Manta. I just give you a brief interview of what we're doing and happy to share more with you guys.
Hello, good morning. My name is Luke. I'm a research cryptographer at Polychain Capital, which is a VC. I work closely with the Manta guys a lot on some of the exciting things they've spoken about thus far, and we will go on to discuss.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sean Tabrizi. I'm one of the core developers working on Substrate, Polkadot, Kusama, and all the, you know, the awesome things we're building here. And yeah, I've been working with Manta for a little while now, and I'm really excited to talk about privacy.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. So, you know, I guess Luke's, yeah,
okay, start, yeah.
Sean, yeah, since you've got the mic now. First question rolling on to you. So what is your view on the role of privacy in Web3? And do you feel like it's important, not really important?
Yeah, I think the obvious answer is very important. I think that privacy is a fundamental human right. Obviously, not everyone using blockchains have to be humans, right? You can have, you know, other services, but like I think for us as individuals, privacy is very important. I think that privacy is not non-existent because of any disagreement on this kind of thing. I think everyone wants privacy. It's just a natural step into the process of designing these decentralized systems, right? We started with blockchains in order to make them verifiable and public. The easiest solution is just to show everything, right? But as we improve our technologies, as we improve our knowledge of the space, we can actually add layers like privacy while still maintaining all of the same kind of fundamental things we want in the blockchain space. So I think that privacy is absolutely fundamental. I think it's super needed. I think it's just one of those things that's a matter of time to get there, and that's why you guys are pushing it forward.
Yeah, I concur certainly with a lot of that. I think it's interesting to kind of decide collectively in the same essence of what Web3 and blockchain all those years ago is built on, as to what we want. There's a dissection between privacy being important because people desire it, and based on how this technology is constructed, privacy being necessary. It's not just what Manta's doing now isn't just, I hate to say it, but just, you know, money, as people seem to perceive this industry as, but it's programmability, and there are simply behaviors we cannot have if we don't have right. There's a reason democratic voting is done in secret, and you see that amongst DAOs. There's a reason DeFi people are being rugged left, right, and center. Yes, they may well be more difficult if you're not being able to see, you know, confidentiality and anonymity with just people vetting these smart contracts or whatever, finding these subs. There's a reason that people don't like to show their entire NFT wallets to these entrants to these events. There's a reason that gaming will literally never work without these aspects. So it depends what you want. I want it. I'm a massive advocate for it. And I find it better that now we have the opportunity to say, it's less of a desire or wishful thinking as it was in with Facebook and earlier iterations of web. And it's, if we want to get there, there's things we have to rearrange for now. Otherwise, it simply won't work. So I think it's important, but in some cases, or the next step, I guess, it's like really fundamental that you use lots of things and it isn't focusing that you simply cannot do correctly if we don't have privacy around. I mean, the nature of drawing on the Facebook analogy of one person, one centralized entity having all our information versus what a blockchain is, which is everyone having everyone's information all the time. I find actually more harrowing on the latter. So it depends how we want to define this industry. I feel it's people driven, it's developer driven going forwards.
Right. I think I completely agree with both Sean and Luke said. I just want to share some of my personal feelings, right? So I'm from a more kind of a technical background. So I did a PhD in computer science. When I first look at blockchain, right? So it's kind of interesting because there is a kind of a big gap between people's perception of the privacy in blockchain and what the reality is, the technical, the hard truth side of that, right? So I think most people here are kind of like a Web3 or decentralization believers, right? We think that blockchain is going to be the future. But at the same time, right, if you think about actually how public ledger works, people saw this kind of hey, it's using cutting edge crypto, it must be private. But it actually exactly the opposite, right? It's more like sending money over Twitter. That's kind of an analogy I always want to use, right? So notably, your most important piece of your data is your financial history. It's public on-chain. Once your identity to you and the address is getting leaked, and most likely getting leaked forever, basically your financial history will be on-chain. And what makes it worse is that it's a blockchain, right? It will be there forever, right? So that's really a fundamental problem we are trying to solve here. I think, but getting back to the practical side, right? I don't think people are going to make trade-offs between the privacy and the convenience. And what we are trying to do here, all the Manta folks trying to do here, we want to making the technology better so that you don't have to make this hard trade-off, right? So right now you need to have very slow transactions. You need to have very high gas fees. That's kind of a big burden for people adopting privacy. And what we're doing here is that we're trying to lower the barrier so that you don't have to make the trade-off, essentially, right? So that's basically where I'm coming from, yeah.
Not much to add. I think that's so important that the convenience factor is there because people will go with the default, right, automatically. And if it's easier to opt into a private solution, then I think people will be more likely to do that. And they may not care about private transactions today, but what happens in 5 years? What happens in 10 years? What happens when your address is leaked, and 5 years from now we can link everything back together?
Yeah, so that was a great transition into the next question, right? Because it sounds like, definitely right now, privacy in Web3 is something that people are starting to talk about, but still wondering why it's important, right? And so we've kind of talked about that, but the next question is the consensus, at least up here, right, is that privacy is important. So why isn't it being adopted? Why aren't people paying attention to it?
I think part of the reason is the hurdles that you have to jump through, being inconvenient, and also it's seen as it's sort of being used for, well, if you're not doing anything that's nefarious, then you have nothing to hide, right? And I'm sure there's.
All right, I can start. Yeah, I think this is. I'm kind of from the technical background, so I'm always trying to attack the problem from the technical angle. To me, if you think really kind of thinking from the first principle, there is no reason private transactions has more gas fees, is less convenient. I think just right now, the technology kind of in the inflation point, right? We're not really there yet. If you look at, I will talk that from the two perspectives, right? So first perspective is user experience, right? So for example, right now, if you're using the existing kind of private product on the market, for example, Zcash, right? So they are great. They did a lot of pioneering work in the in the space, right? But it really lacks some like utilities. For example, Zcash is a single asset like a shielded transfer protocol, right? It kind of lack, but the entire like Web3 world has moved on. People want to do DeFi, people want to do GameFi, people want to do Metaverse, right? So this is I think just from the UX perspective, right? So like how do you cope people's privacy needing all these kind of applications, right? So that's one thing. And the second thing is because of the stage of art of the zero-knowledge proof systems, right? They're still not as efficient as just like a planned computation on chain. So you essentially need to pay way more gas fees, right? So right now, right? But I think what I'm really bullish on the entire space because a lot of like smart people on Earth actually working together to solve this efficiency issue of the zero-knowledge proof systems connectively, so that I already see kind of like a Moore's law in terms of the speed of the zero-knowledge proof systems in the past 5 years, actually, right? But I think the Moore's law is going to happen for the zero-knowledge proof systems, like going on.
Yeah, drawing on the user side, take not even a blockchain system, but another system, and say, well, you can pay $1, let's say, USDT for an Ethereum transaction in some dream world, obviously. Or you can pay $1.10 to have an Ethereum transaction with privacy. People will almost always gravitate towards the $1. And I think this is one side of the coin. And it's partially because there's been a gross disservice given to humanity on what the actual value of sovereignty is, not the peddled narrative of you must be a criminal if you're following this, rather than the structures we have in society should perhaps better enable individuality and sovereignty, but that doesn't suit some people, so it hasn't been constructed to be that way. And this is still just drawing a little bit on the history of it. On the sort of flip side to that, although it doesn't, another thing that is subliminal, which fills me with some warmth, is Signal, Tor, DuckDuckGo. These things are not accidents. These things are possibly subliminal, but knee-jerk responses to failings in Web 2, to failings in previous iterations. So I think people understand a bit the relevance of privacy. It just needs to be contextualized in their life, and metadata harvesting and things like that, which of course can be done on the blockchain, is hard to understand. So I'm in large favor of something like ZK Snarks. I've been very, very fortunate enough to study them for 3 years and work with them just on my own and do them with the Manta team. But this will enable, when the ZK roll-ups and the ZK Manta Poseidon Pay comes out, privacy as well as scalability. So we're taking that property that everyone's going for, scalability, and hopefully we can have privacy on at the end, so that people can see the two come hand in hand. Otherwise, it is quite difficult to help people understand like the value of what they can do. People just sort of think, I don't know, Facebook's free, I don't care.
Yeah, so I mean, we all agree that privacy is important. Why does it exist, this space? And my take on it is kind of twofold. One is the technology. I think it's still being innovated. And I think that it's, from my understanding, still very much research. And I think that as research manifests into like solid libraries in multiple languages that developers can easily integrate in open source software, that's really where you're gonna see it. And I think that still today as a developer, it's not easy to find the good libraries or ones that are easily pluggable, right? So this is like the first issue of actually using it. But also I think that privacy, unfortunately, directly competes with another big metric in this space right now, and it's scalability, right? Like everyone here is all about like faster, more transactions, whatever. And you mentioned about gas fees. I don't really think it's the fee aspect, it's the computation aspect, that a gas fee does increase for a zero knowledge proof or a privacy transaction, but the fact is that there are less privacy transactions that can fit into a block. And so this is exactly against what you see in this ecosystem, which is all about scaling up. So obviously, as we improve the technology, make it faster, more on par with existing technologies, and also make the underlying blockchain tech itself faster so that it would support as many private transactions as we want, then we'll see it come into space.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, keep the mic. Next question's going to you, Sean. But yeah, so, it sounds like right now, there's some user experience sort of frictions, right? There's some overall sort of sentiment towards privacy. as a friction as well, and then the question of performance and scalability. But let's say, for example, right, we go into the space maybe 3 to 5 years from now, right? All these problems are somewhat solved, if not all fundamentally solved. What sort of use cases, at least from your angles, right, do you see or are most excited about applying to privacy for, or with, and why?
Yeah, I think as mentioned earlier, that there are fundamental parts of the things we do in life which involve privacy. I think voting is a very great example of that. If you are worried about your vote being public and that people could physically hurt you or force you to do certain things in certain ways, the whole system fails. So, I think things like voting, things like being able to, again, just to hold a normal balance, be able to, I know that actually ZK stuff solves a lot of the MEV problems, right? So right now, in the space, you can see other transactions in the queue, front run them, do all that kind of stuff. If you're able to keep these transactions private or these trades private, you're able to, actually have a working free market, right? Versus some kind of game system. So I think these are some things we're going to see. I think the most exciting thing about the zero knowledge space and privacy in general is that probably there are things that we don't even know we need, but will exist as a result of these technologies existing, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think DeFi is a fantastic example. Very contextual voting is another great example, and that will drive very, very different game theoretic scenarios to what we're used to. When people don't see what we call them the large players in these DAOs or in these committees of voting for, and there's not necessarily as much of a group mentality and individualism, then we will drive the outcome of systems kind of the way we want. Another definitely large one is gaming, and almost satellited as well compared to some of the others. There's just it's a blockchain. You're given a state that's updated. If you're playing, I don't know, Fortnite or Call of Duty, if that still exists, and you're running around a map, and this state is being updated where every player is. Whoever's front running, whoever's the GEV, whatever the MEV equivalent game is going to see and going to win. You won't be able to play basic games like battleships until this works. Other ones is like NFTs, but the example I think that is most pertinent to the hype that's going on at the moment is just access control. Just boiling down back to the most basic sentence everyone's heard of around these zero knowledge proofs. That ability to prove to prove a statement without revealing anything other than that statement itself. If it comes to a place where you can't enter one event having not got an NFT from some ETHDenver perhaps for ETH Barcelona, you don't want to show the doorman or the digital doorman everything that's in your wallet. Taking on a much further example, something we don't yet think about, that Brandon talked about in his presentation with the view keys, taxes. It's inevitable that taxes will be, with the blockchain base, they will be further digitalized. And you don't want every single middleman having view keys here and being able to see this or see all of your taxes or all of your income. It's not necessary. So it's providing access control to all the information we have as users. And I think that encompasses probably as many exciting things as you could think about. And obviously getting into nightclubs.
All right, that's a wonderful answer. I kind of want to give a lazy answer here, right? Like 100% agree with what Sean said, right? So I think the best application for privacy or private blockchain hasn't been discovered yet, 100%. I think what I'm always amazed by the entire Web3 space is that people are so creative, right? So like once you like having programmability, right? I'm pretty sure like even Vitalik hadn't imagined like once he kind of introduced smart contract to the blockchain world, like how big an impact of that would be, right? I think the similar things will happen for the programmability for the privacy asset, right? That's my perspective. And I do have something like personally I do care. For example, you see recently there is a kind of constitution DAO auction for the US constitutions. And the decentralized folks actually kind of lose because there is a hedge fund guy actually just bid like $1 more, right? So think of that if that auction is private, right? And so the decentralized folks has more way to kind of organizing this kind of thing like in privacy. So that I bet this kind of thing will happens less, right? So also, I think, for example, even if you think DAO is going to be the future of kind of like organizations, right? Even the simple things like payroll of DAO would be like a kind of like a big applications for the like private asset. Yeah.
One of the things that really excites me about Manta is that it's more than a one-stop shop. That it's a place, an environment where you have a suite of applications, right? And I think that that's normalizing privacy. And as an end user, I'm super concerned about, okay, my new address that's now private. Now my funds are private. But okay, I can't interact with certain dApps that have specific controls, or I can't interact with certain exchanges, no matter like how many hops I go. But I think with an increasing number of users and an increasing number of applications and use cases, you can't exclude everybody who's participated in this. So that's exciting to me.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. So yeah, a lot of cool use cases, a lot of cool vision. I guess the question now is more like, my previous one was about looking forward to the future, getting rid of the bottlenecks, getting rid of sort of what's holding us back. But there are, also privacy products on Web3 on the market today, right? You've got like the OGs of the world, like the Zcash, Moneros, the Dashes, right? Then you've got the products on Ethereum, like Tornado Cash, right? And so, I mean, I'm curious, have you guys ever used any of these, right? What do you like about it? What do you feel like, could definitely be improved upon? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, so I would say I haven't really used all of the existing ZK stuff as much as I should. I do own Zcash. I think one of the things I learned really early on, which I didn't expect, because I had some expectations from Monero's days, but I think if you do a normal transaction, it's not private by default. You have to actually enable that, which is a very weird thing for there's no other reason for me to own Zcash except for like wanting to be private. So the fact that it's not that by default is super strange to me. That was like a weird realization. I think the other existing products that, again, I really agree with Shimon here that, they came up to add privacy on top of Bitcoin, basically, right? We are way past that. This is not even an interesting thing really anymore. So these tools, while they exist and they work, and my understanding is that they're very cool, there's a lot of good research there, these aren't really the tools that we need today. Like what you all are building and exactly what we need. So it's cool, but it's like it almost got outdated before it was actually useful.
Yeah, I feel that pain with Monero. I certainly feel the same with Zcash. I like it. I love the team there, but it is kind of just private Bitcoin. It's OG, and it bolsters itself on, I think it's argumentatively a strong proof of work network, and it's kind of a bit of a beacon for commencing, but it is just, there's no programmability. That's the difference. And with your other example was Tornado Cash. Well, not Tornado Cash Nova, you have fixed amount withdrawals and you don't actually have privacy, you just have anonymity. Tornado Cash Nova will have privacy when it adds the confidentiality. So when you don't know the two accounts, but as I'm sure you've seen many of these crypto Twitter reports, you do see the amounts, and that's also a problem. So it still gives you incentive and bias towards activity on chain. But it does boil down to programmability. What you were saying about smart contracts, that's what's enabling systems. That's what's going to enable governance. That's what's going to enable taxes. That's what's going to enable complex NFT lending structures. And these things will be the things we're porting privacy to, not just an L1 where we move money around or move tokens around.
Yeah, I think I started to use privacy blockchain products several years ago. I do also own Zcash, and I use their almost every single client. And also I was using Tornado Cash. I think kind of one of the biggest motivation to do Manta is that I find it's not easy to use on Earth, and I think we can do better. Yeah.
A fun rainy day activity for anyone is to try to get Monero from an exchange. Send it to a self-hosted wallet that you have, and then find a friend, and then try to send that Monero to them, to their own self-hosted wallet. That is quite a challenge. You'll learn a lot while doing it, and if you're super technical, it's fun. But for anybody else, it's like that's never going to happen. And so there's absolutely a long way where we can go in terms of usability from the existing private transaction solutions.
Awesome. Yeah, I think, it's not just about private transactions, but like first-time crypto users and even like long-term crypto users like myself, like just the wallet address itself is very intimidating. Every time you send, right, I want to copy and paste like 3 to 5 times just to make sure that it's like, not like keylogged or something, and then got to check to make sure that the address is still right. And yeah, it's intimidating no matter, how long you've been in the space. And so, adding that privacy layer, playing with that rainy day hobby, I think, yeah, definitely explains some sort of user experience frictions here. But also I wanted to go back to a comment that you made, Shumo, about Constitution DAO, and more broadly about DAOs in general, right? Like democratic voting that you also mentioned earlier, Luke. And so, the question here is like, specifically with DAOs, right? Like, what do you think of like on-chain privacy rules with them in particular? Do you think there's space for privacy in DAOs, or do you believe that it should be sort of one of like full transparency?
Yeah, I think actually this is really interesting because I think DAOs absolutely should have privacy where it's needed, but also not have it where it's not needed. Like I think that there are organizations which take advantage of the fact that you have a public figure. There's going to be a finite number of people there. You want representation. You want people to put their name and their status on the line for certain types of things. But there are other kinds of votes which you want exactly the opposite. So it's not about just like slapping privacy on everything. It's about like finding the scenarios and situations where privacy acts as a conduit to incentivizing the right behavior, right? And then also removing privacy where it incentivizes the right behavior. It's all about making conscious decisions. So I think DAOs will gain from it, but I hope that it doesn't become something where it's blindly used as like, okay, just slap it onto anything, right?
Yeah, I think to DAOs, perhaps the realization will be a little bit latent, but it is very necessary. There's a reason we refer to these things as governance structures. It's because we are expecting, we are assuming that we're going to have some kind of layers. It mightn't be based on, I could even say nepotism, as some things have been done before. It might be done meritocracy. It'll be much to the discretion of those involved, as it can be with the blockchain-based free will. However, there are going to be levels, there are going to be systems, there are going to be streamlined behaviors, and not having all conversations, decisions, all voting understood by every person at every level is going to be super important to provide a structure. Else it's simply just going to be a massive line abreast of the number of people in the DAO. So yeah, it's also very important in Constitution DAO. Ken Griffin would never have known to be able to put an extra $1 in if we didn't scream about it on Twitter all the time. Yeah, but then perhaps on the flip side, you talk about some of these range stuff. Perhaps you would have not have, if they knew they wanted to get towards, what was it, 47? Quote me, I'm probably wrong, $1 million, and some will go, I don't know how much is in there. I don't know. I'm not going to put $1 million. There's probably already enough. So there is. So we must come up with solutions for things like that Constitution DAO example. I think it's very important. I think it's very important, obviously, for the services. If it's a gaming DAO, if there's Lex DAO, a legal DAO. There's no way legal conversations by regulation and by law are allowed to be completely publicized with parties, internal legal discussions, just from adhering to like the judiciary constraints. People must be particular about what they say, and they must use zero-knowledge proofs or some aspect of privacy to keep certain conversations confidential, just not by their choice, but by the legal framework's choice.
Oh, that's a pretty interesting and provoking discussion. I think, I guess from my perspective, I think DAO is just like the way people organize themselves, right? So I think the key point here is that given right now how the DAO works, that you have to be like 100% transparent. I think in the future, I can definitely see they're going to a mixture, even in a single DAO, perhaps like these folks that have already said, right? Some part of things need to be transparent and should be transparent, and the other part and should be private. And I think the key point here is that you must have the choice, right? And right now, compared with the status quo, right, you don't have this choice. And this is this is why we are kind of doing this like hybrid model of privacy smart contract, right? You should, and we should make it easy and get better developer tools to privatize the part that you want, but you should keep the remaining parts for better UX, for better governance, for whatever else to be public, right? So I think that's exactly, I think, kind of the design philosophy we are trying to build the system here. Yeah.
I think that's so important. In the past, it's been binary. It's either been 1 or 0. Everything's been completely public or completely private, but it doesn't have to be that way. And giving users and DAOs control and their own like sovereignty over which parts that they want to be public is extremely powerful.
Awesome. So yeah, I guess we're all proponents of privacy on this stage, but I'm curious to know, like on a scale of 1 to 10, right? Like how I guess hygienic do you think your on-chain privacy is right now with your day-to-day activities, right? And I can kind of go give a first example, right? Like I feel like I'm a 2 out of 10, right? Because like in the events where I try to be private, there's not really that sort of solution on chain, and so what I end up doing is I like split between multiple different wallets. If I mint an NFT on Ethereum versus if I mint on Polygon, I try to keep the wallets separate. And then, whatever lending protocols I have on Polygon versus Ethereum or Avalanche or something, right? Like that's also private or isolated from each other. And I try not to link them together. But what ends up happening is that like, there's this huge, like, I guess, address book of different wallet addresses that I own, but I also can't document that address book because if someone got that document, then they would link everything together, right? And so, yeah, that's why I'd say I'm a 2 out of 10.
If you're a 2 out of 10, then I must be like a 1.5 out of 10. It's hard, right? And when we think about things like crowd loans too, I mean, that's another area where you want to prove like, yes, I was a crowd loan participant. And I backed this project, but you also don't want to really disclose like how much DOT you have or Kusama. And the future is multi-chain. I think we all agree with that pretty strongly. And you have funds on different networks, and it would be fairly easy to accidentally send funds to an Ethereum account that you haven't used in 5 years, and then it's kind of like, oops. The genie's out of the bottle there.
Thanks. It's a really hard question. I think maybe 2.1 out of 10. It has a little bit more privacy because actually, two folks don't know, I think, just by default, right? The privacy model of different kind of like blockchain a little bit different, right? So for example, you get actually better privacy just using Bitcoin than Ethereum. So I actually use because of the UTXO model, right? So also, I'm kind of trying very hard to use the wallet implementation of Bitcoin that actually respects privacy and also do the right stuff, right? So it's still limited privacy because you don't have ZK, but maybe I'm slightly a little bit better here. But I don't think that matters too much.
Don't take my example as an anchor for your. It's not a benchmark. Feel free to
I don't want to feel like the odd one out, but I feel like you guys. I'm like an 8, maybe a 9.
Oh damn! Okay, you took my comment to the extreme.
I don't trust any of them. No, but I think most people are actually like 2s and 1s. It's also by default difficult unless you're very particular to be much higher in these, unless you're spinning off Tornado Cash and putting it, rewriting through Tor and keeping in like Raspberry Pis where all your money is that's never touched the internet, and you keep cold wallets. It's exhausting. Like any kind of private aspect to cold storage and custody, never mind on-chain activity, is already exhausting. You don't need to be as frantic there. But maybe it's the frustrations and the ability to see the shortcomings that us four, probably more you 3 below 3, have seen that is driven this desire to change it, and the realization, which is forcing these strong discussions and opinions. I guess when you have that invigoration amongst people based on a failing that they see, it will drive change faster than a lot of other things. So I think that we have low scores and is more of a catalyst to change than if we were comfortable with what's going on. So in that way, it's quite pleasing to hear some people who are advocates at sort of towards the bottom.
Me, yeah.
Yeah.
So since you're 8 out of 10, do you have you should answer my question honestly. Do you have a piles of cash under your bed? I think that's the best way you can keep privacy now.
No, but I have a bank in Luxembourg, and I think that's the same.
Yeah, I think I hate this question because it's too reveal. It's like too intrapersonal, like perspective. Like Jesus, I could be doing so much better, right? I think I'm probably like a 5 out of 10. I would say like I have the I introduce privacy and I introduce like abstractions wherever it's convenient and where I'm just like consciously thinking a little bit like, okay, I'm aware of what I'm doing here, right? So like I've never tried to transfer balances between direct accounts. I always try to find an intermediary. Often it's an exchange, right? I like, kind of pass it to exchange as a very like soft, like anonymization filter. But I think that this space is like it's again, the UX isn't there to make it easy, and there's always the concern that you do all of this work and it can be all undone with one transaction. And so this is kind of the thing where it's like I don't feel that I should make it like driving my life. Like I'm trying to make all this thing private because it's just one small mistake can undo all of that work. So for me, I'd rather focus on innovating in a space, building platforms like Substrate, launching networks like Polkadot, so that others can focus on this and really make it like dead simple, stupid.
All right, we'll do the dirty work. But yeah, so I did some mental math. It's around an average of like a 3 or 4 out of 10 on this stage, and we're also the ones trying to, really innovate in the privacy space. So I think what that really indicates is that there's a lot of room for improvement. Yeah, we'll try to get everyone to an 8 out of 10 like Luke and hide some cash under the bed. But yeah, like I think let's take this a step further and look out into the future, 5 to 10 years from now, right? 2 parts to this. And I think the first part is really interesting because, we're all builders here. We're all innovators, right? We see a lot of different ecosystem plays. And so I'm really curious, right? Like, where do you see Web3 trending, right? Like 5 to 10 years from now, do you feel like it will replace the internet? Do you think that there will be some sort of symbiosis, right? What sort of use cases do you think are yet to be explored, but you're really excited for? And, what role does privacy play in that?
Of course. I hold a pretty open stance. If anyone who talks to me about this is that the space we see around us today is all DeFi, and that is not what Web3 promised. That is one aspect of it, but not the whole thing. And the issue is that we have these basically single blockchains like Ethereum. There's one pipe, all transactions fit through it, and when everyone's competing for a spot there, the only justified transactions are the one where you can make more money than it costs you. Transaction fees are $200. You're not going to be making a vote into some kind of governance thing that's trivial. You're going to be doing DeFi transactions which make you millions of dollars on each thing. I think in 5 to 10 years, I think with innovations like Polkadot, allowing there to be alternative non-fee based models, like if we have a lease model, right, that you can actually introduce other pillars which wouldn't exist in the current ecosystem today. Things like identity management, like decentralized identity, things like governance and DAOs, like not even at the big constitution DAO level, but like even just small levels, like your basketball club at home or whatever. Like this is the kind of thing where you can actually do that. So I think we're going to start seeing Web3 be less DeFi and more about the actual pillars, which was kind of promised to begin with, right?
Yeah, I concur. I think entirely with that. I'm glad that the timeline you picked was 5 to 10 years rather than 1 to 2, because when people see this in terms of well, maybe cycle for when next token go up, I don't know, is to underestimate the technical challenges behind implementing some of this technology. I think by the time 10 years has come, we will have built enough fortified infrastructure to facilitate large-scale behaviors. And as I said before, with some of the metaverse and the GameFi, privacy bakes a huge part into that, because there are simply things you cannot do if you do not have privacy. And I think in 10 years, we'll have moved quick enough as a unit, not to discredit that timeline, given that it was, 1960 that ARPANET brought the first internet, but 1995 when privacy with SSL was ported onto 35 years later, despite the way Mr. Musk would probably want you to think he invented it for PayPal, which isn't true. I think it will. There is a transition, and a transition which will drive simply just a more important ecosystem. I've been working in this space for 4 years, and I was almost shamefully hesitant for the first couple of years on making people commit, and I was oscillating back and forth between how I thought it would be the future and how it would carve the direction it's going in. But given now, having gotten a holistic sense, I think it's the rest of the world's immersion into it is kind of inevitable. I don't really see the internet as a competitor. The internet, I think, would have to change into its form to work alongside and to cohere with how Web3 is built, because it's not just money, it's not just programmability, not even just behaviors. It's an ecosystem. It's really a new formulation of being. And when people look, I think, just because it's human nature, when they look at Web3, they look at just the lens, the only lens they have, the only glasses they have, the internet glasses. And I think it's going to be much larger. And I think if you're able to spend a bit more time and commute how you see it, enabling so many people coming together, we're tending towards leaderless societies, so with enforced rules, obviously, not just back to savages. But we're tending towards this, and it's going to be epic. And honestly, it's a pleasure to be a part of.
Thanks. Yeah, that's really that's really interesting. I think I kind of agree what Luke said. Basically, first I think Web 2 and Web 3 will find kind of like a symbiosis relationship. It's not because should be, but this is just like what it would be, right? More likely, let's say, I do see. I mean, if you see the momentum, right? I think Web 3 get way more kind of a momentum than Web 2, right? I think if Web 2 doesn't adapt themselves to be kind of like symbiosis with the Web 3, right? People are probably going to abandon them. So that's basically my perspective, right? Also, I think one thing interesting is that I think just like people kind of lacks imagination of like thinking of what's going to happen right now, and people usually using kind of analogy, right? I think analogy will kind of be true, but only to a certain extent, right? So this, I genuinely don't think, right? So this is I think the kind of like the promise of Web3 that actually like enable more possibilities and more ways of people organizing themselves. And I genuinely think like there are definitely something we can never think of will be appear in 5 to 10 years. Yeah, maybe like we should have a record of this conversation, and then we can check back and how much we said is true. I think probably like kind of will be embarrassed that that's my take. Yeah.
So I have two main takes. One is that it takes a long time to build strong systems, and it takes a long time for them to evolve and grow sustainably. And I think that when we look out 5 or 10 years, we want people to be using blockchains, and maybe they don't know it, maybe they don't care about it, but they're using them because they're faster, because they're cheaper, because they're more convenient, and the underlying development frameworks are easier for the developers to build on, using a blockchain underlying it. And so in that sense, I see that we're going to get more users in that way, versus selling them maybe on the benefits that are available today. We'll be able to have a lot more people when we can make it like selfishly make it a better experience like for them, and they can say, oh, this is a no-brainer. Of course, we're going to use it.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys very much. I think I have one last question, but it's really for the audience. And I'm super curious, does anyone feel like they're a 10 out of 10 in terms of on-chain privacy? Raise your hand if you feel like you're a 10. No, don't feel intimidated because we gave such low scores. We're just bad. What about like a 9 out of 10? Wait. You've got to come up here and tell us your secrets. Oh. Okay, huge advocate of Monero, pretty much came close to the Holy Grail. How does he do it? Oh, wow, okay. Okay, cool, you know, that's, as long as it works. All right, so just one 9 out of 10. What about like an 8 out of 10? 7 out of 10? 6? 5? 4? 5 or 4? 4? All right, what are your secrets, sir? What's pretty bad? I mean, it's twice mine. Okay.
I do know there's a person 10 out of 10. This is my, I wouldn't disclose his name. He's my like cryptographer friend. And
The fact that you know who he is already
no,
not
it's
a 10
just
out of
me, right? Just me, right? But I think his trick is that he never used blockchain, and he only used cash.
Okay, sure, but cash has serial numbers. But anyway, yeah, and the last part of the conversation, just curious, you know, does anyone have any questions for the panelists up here? Oh, yeah. Victor, where is Victor? Is Victor here? Victor, where did the name Manta come from?
It's kind of flying underwater, right? So it's like.
Yeah, so for those of you that didn't hear, right, there's a natural camouflage that manta rays have, right, whereby if you look from the top of the ocean, is that the scientific term, the top of the ocean, down to the bottom of the ocean, you see a darkness colored of the skin pigment, and then when you look from the bottom up, where you see the sunlight, right, the pigment underneath is a lot lighter. So it's sort of a privacy layer there, and also they're very peaceful, but very large and, you know, commanding. Yeah. I think that was a stingray. Yeah, we were gonna call ourselves Stingray, but then Steve Irwin died, so we were like, oh fuck. Yeah, any questions from the audience? All right, I'm glad we answered every single privacy question you could possibly ever have on chain. So with that being said, we've got about 10 minutes left before the next event. So yeah, happy to mingle, network. If anyone has any questions, if anyone's looking for a job, I'm pretty sure all of us are hiring, you know, a lot. So yeah, thank you guys for attending. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's good.